Welcome back to the Pulse, to this very important conversation. A new research by scientists at the University of Southampton has revealed the public's willingness to take COVID-19 vaccines in Ghana is decreasing as vaccine hesitancy increases. 3 surveys have been conducted so far. Between August 2020 and March 2021, the data showed a decrease in vaccine hesitancy from 36.8% to 17.2%. But the latest survey conducted in June 2021 actually shows vaccine hesitancy has increased from the March 2021 figure of 17.2% to 28.5%. The reasons for the vaccine hesitancy include people not having enough information, some believing vaccines are dangerous, and heightened government mistrust. Dr. Kechafs Atengle, he is Executive Director for PAX Africa. He joins us via Zoom for more on this conversation. Doc, I'm grateful for your time. What did you find in your recent study on vaccine hesitancy in Ghana? Kindly unmute for me, Doc.
Thank you for having me, and it's a great pleasure to be back on your set to discuss these issues, because the last time when we finished with the second round of the work, we had some conversations here. And it's just noteworthy, like you mentioned, that hesitancy has rather increased, which is something that is of concern. We have engaged with policymakers from the Ghana Health Service and then the Ministry of Health. And like you mentioned, these they have different factors that have contributed to those. From the studies, we see gender dimension, the political dimension, and the religious dimension, just like we did find out in the previous rounds as factors, driving the hesitancy. But the new dimension that came out in this recent study is the educational dimension. Just to note that folks who are relatively more educated, say from their first degree upwards, tend to be more prone towards hesitancy. And we believe it is also because the widened access to online information. So most of these pieces of information, which we've described as fake news, most of them are fake news that are put out there by various individuals, some unknowingly. Very times we've had access to pieces of information on social media, but without critically assessing those, we believe them and then we broadcast them, which is quite dangerous. So it calls for action from all stakeholders, governments playing a leading role, media, research institutions, ordinary citizens, religious groups, everyone getting on board to address these concerns.
Now, you talk about lack of information on vaccines. You talk about mistrust for government, and you talk about how people think is dangerous. But what other contributory factors can you lay your fingers at to this vaccine hesitancy?
So those are the key things that came out. They were very loud. We also saw the various media platforms that people do use. Take, for instance, the bulk of people use the mass media that we conceptualized as TV, radio, and the newspapers. And apart from those, the next most used platform was social media, which has proven to be very, very strong in recent times because of the wide access to the internet. And there are various news portals online as well that people have news from. We saw people accessing news also from official sources like the Ghana Health Service, but that didn't come out very strongly. So even though it's among the top, sources of news, it wasn't as strong as these other ones. So we think that a way to go would be to enhance access to information from the Ghana Health Service, which is the official, source of information for this COVID-related issues. So that is the direction that we will want to urge stakeholders to see how we can work together to reproduce information coming from the Ghana Health Service and kind of critically evaluate pieces of information that we receive from wide social unofficial information about COVID, bring the Ghana Health Service and other research institutions. We have them across the country. It's not like we don't have the capacity. The capacity is there. So let's bring these professionals, technocrats on board to discuss the veracity of these pieces of information around COVID. And I believe these will go a long way to tone down the effects that these fake news would be having on the average citizen.
What has been the role of the Ghana Health Service in putting together these findings? And of course, have you also engaged them on these findings? What has been their response, if you have?
So right from the beginning, we have been engaging with the Ghana Health Service. So the first, second rounds, we shared with them the findings. And this third one, which is the very worrying one, we shared with them equally. Just this week, there was a meeting in Kumasi, a high-level, technical meeting within the Ghana Health Service, and insider news information we get suggests that this research was highly discussed and valued within the conversation. Therefore, the media release that was produced from that meeting has hesitancy as a key thing that the Ghana Health Service would want to tackle. But a shortfall from that document we see is that no indication is provided on the how vaccine hesitancy is going to be tackled going forward, because the meeting actually was aimed at reviewing the strengths and weaknesses, the lapses within the current vaccination program. And so acknowledging that vaccine hesitancy is a key thing to look at going forward, we are ready to engage further with the Ghana Health Service and see how we can produce some communication strategy, strategic documents, plans to see how we tone down the effect of these fake news and enhance the acceptance. This study we're doing, there are other rounds that we will be producing. So we hope that by the next round, we will see some downward trends of hesitancy, which would be something that I believe all stakeholders will appreciate very much.
In all of this, Doc, what would you say is the role of the media, politicians, and even ordinary members of the public in encouraging the vaccine, acceptance of the vaccine?
So everyone, it's an all hands on deck approach that we need to take. So leadership obviously is very necessary. So our political actors would need to take the lead role to help us quell all those governance issues that have come up. We talk about the Sputnik V, the troubles around it and all that. These don't help, the campaign. So we would want to urge our political actors to address some of these things in a much more trustworthy way, because we need to bring all hands on deck. So in the study, we find the political dynamics around the hesitancy, which is not very good for us. And so we will want to urge our political actors to work at that. If possible, secure much more doses for the program, for the vaccination program. And if in the medium to longer term, if we can secure some resources to begin local production of the vaccines, that will go a long way to help. Because we noticed just this same week, we noticed the European Union is going to provide some support to South Africa to do some local production of vaccines. If Ghana could secure the location of the AFCFTA Secretariat, I believe there's nothing our politicians cannot do. They are equally competent to secure some of these resources for local production, and we would want to urge our political actors to take on that, because these are the times we need them to take to win such initiatives for us. Next, I would want to talk about the media and how we would need to be very critical in engagements around the COVID, so that when we find when there is any information that is put out by the Ghana Health Service, official information, we would want to engage critically, ask questions that are not so obvious, the hows, the whys, those kind of critical pieces of information. And I know the multimedia group does very well with those, so we need to do much more of that. And again, on the media, the informal pieces of information that we find on social media. There are different organizations that are into fact checking. Multimedia would want to get involved, or even if it's in partnership with those organizations, try to fact check some of these pieces of information. It could be a new program you may want to put out there to fact check some of these things and produce some short videos. Like, we need to engage more with the citizenry, fact check those from official sources, from the different, even engage lead advocates on the fake news side. Even we need to give them a voice, actually let them share their fears, their insecurities with the official sources. Let's put these together and quell the effects that these will be producing. This is something that the media would be very useful in doing for the campaign. And for the average citizen, I believe that we will need to get on board. Average citizen, I would just want to lump that into all other actors. So religious leaders, traditional leaders, opinion leaders, social media, campaigners. Let's get on board and see how well we can use our platforms instead of spreading, fake news. When we find some pieces of information about COVID that we are not very comfortable about, we're not sure of, we may want to share some of those with the media houses or the fact-checking houses and get some of these things right before we reproduce them. Otherwise, we might, if we just go ahead spreading these pieces of fake news, we might be doing more harm than good. So these are things that I think we should be looking out further and providing support on going forward.